Chair Chadha, we're now live.
Okay, good morning and welcome to our virtual board meeting. My name is Ron Chatta, the board chair. As we continue to hold the virtual meeting, there are a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. We are streaming the live portion of this meeting live on our YouTube channel. If we happen to experience any technical difficulties with the live stream, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube. To those who are in attendance, your microphone has been muted, and I ask that you put your hand up if you would like to speak, and we will retain a list of speaking requests as we go. Once you are called upon to speak, please unmute yourself and proceed. We ask that you please always keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. As it relates to voting, please raise a hand to indicate your vote when a vote is called. Should you be disconnected from the video call, please rejoin using the link previously provided. So Mayor Brown's hand was not for this one, I guess, so I already know. So now we move on to the next item, which is the Section 10 Caledon OPP. We will begin today with the Section 10 Caledon OPP meeting. Welcome, Inspector Grant. We will now refer to the OPP Caledon agenda. Roll call, all members present except, I believe, Mayor Crombie. Yes. Is there any declaration of conflict by any board member? Seeing, hearing none. The first item will be approval of the minutes from the meeting held Friday, September 25th, 2020. Any comments, or may I have a mover? If not, regarding the Caledon section OPP 10? By Mr. Watia. Do we have a seconder? By Mr. Barton. All in favor? This is carried. The second item is Caledon OPP third quarter report. Inspector Grant, you wanna?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Police Service Board. Before I get into the third quarter of 2020 Police Service Board report, I would just like to introduce Chief Superintendent Dwight Peer. He is my Central Region Commander in the OPP, responsible for 13 detachments. Caledon's one of the detachments that reports to Central Region Headquarters. So just want to welcome Chief Peer to this meeting.
Welcome, Chief.
Okay, to begin the third quarter of 2020, I'll start with public complaints. We've received in this quarter a total of 5 complaints, 3 policy, 1 service, 1 conduct. Moving forward to motor vehicle collisions and type. We are down in totality of collisions 22.4%. So we're down in fatals, personal injuries, and property damage collisions during this period. Our criminal code and provincial statute charges, we are down significantly in this quarter for Highway Traffic Act and criminal code traffic. That's primarily due to an 18% vacancy rate that we experienced during this quarter because of retirements, lateral transfers of officers going to other OPP locations. Our training was reactivated for mandatory training for all our officers during the COVID. So they were forced to go back into training, taking them off the front line temporarily, as well as this is a heavy vacation period of time. Since this period, we are back restoring our vacancies and filling those missing members with recruits, experienced officers that we've hired, and fulfilling promotional processes. So that's primarily the reasoning for our enforcement numbers dipping during this quarter. Violent crime, the totality of violent crime is down 6.8%. with a slight increase only in the crimes against persons, which is your threatening type offenses. Property crime, we're slightly up for this quarter, which is 1.5%, but year to date, we're down 6.2%. We've experienced a decline in break and enters as well. A slight increase in thefts, both theft under and theft over. Drug crime, our numbers are up, and that's due to our proactive enforcement through our community street crime unit. Our street crime unit works collaboratively with other street crime units within Central Region OPP, as well as our partners with Peel Regional Police and other neighboring agencies. And this is basically proactive numbers of them getting information and conducting warrants. Clearance rates, we're experiencing during this quarter an increase in clearance rates for violent crime and drug crime, and a slight decrease in property crime, which is still reflective year to date. Property crime, we're down by 1.9% in our clearance rates. Everything else is up. Violent crime is up 10.6%. Drug crime is up 18.3%. That is the Coles Notes version of the Police Service Board report for the third quarter of 2020. If anybody has any specific questions for me. Mr. Boughton, sorry, through chair.
No problem. Mr. Boughton, please go ahead.
Good morning, and certainly welcome to Chief Superintendent Pierre. Nice to have you join us today. And I'm the Calvin rep on this board, so I can tell you that Inspector Grant does a great job for us. So certainly nice to have you join us. Where does the impaired driving show up on your stats?
Okay, sir. They show up on the. Let me just go.
They show up criminal code traffic.
Yeah, that's where it would be.
It would show in there. I get the Calvin Citizen, and I'm blown away by how many impaired driving charges I see every week. That paper is delivered. Yeah, it looks like the numbers is way down. To me, every time I see it, I'm blown away by how many impaired driving charges that you lay on a weekly basis. Can you talk about that? Is it going in the wrong direction? Though the stats certainly don't show that it is. Can you comment on that, Mike?
In this calendar year of 2020, we've seen an increase in the first and second quarter for sure, a drastic increase. The third quarter has a dip, and again, I relate back to that short-term scenario of an 18% vacancy. That's 18% of our front line that's not doing proactive patrols.
Okay.
Because they're transferring out or retiring or on training, not on the front line. And that is responsible for the dip. So we are back into it on quarter number 4. We're well into that now in November. And you're going to see a spike again on the next report. So year end, we are definitely going to be higher in 2020 in comparison to 2019.
Okay, so it is. So what I'm seeing is in the papers is accurate that we do have it trending upwards, which is obviously not a good thing. And my second question would be on the enforcement of the Highway Traffic Act rules of engagement for dump trucks and the problems that we've had with fatal collisions and other collisions this year. Is there an ongoing program on that, and can you speak to that for a moment?
Yes, sir. So my dedicated traffic team has been doing more proactive commercial motor vehicle enforcement, and that also adds to the the reduction in total Highway Traffic Act charges. Reason being, to do a proper inspection of a commercial motor vehicle is very timely. And it could take an hour or more by our members. Whereas if they were out there doing just speeding, they can write 20 tickets an hour. So they might get 4 or 5 tickets in a 2-hour investment of a commercial motor vehicle inspection. But the troubling portion
Okay, yeah, and as you know, every time there's one of these collisions, it's never the driver of the gravel truck or the dump truck that is injured or killed in this. It's always an innocent motorist. So thank you for that, and I hope that we'll continue to be diligent on that. And thank you for the report.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Atia, you want to make a comment?
Thank you for the report. Can you give us more context around the complaints, primarily the policy ones, and then and resolution on these complaints?
Okay, so these numbers reflect the amount of complaints that we received during this quarter. So our professional standards branch or bureau, it takes time to investigate these, and then ultimately there'll be a result. We don't necessarily report on the outcome during this type of police service board report. So if you're asking the specifics, I don't have them at my fingertips. I could look into it if you want me to explain the type of complaints that we're getting. But just to break it down, 3 of the 5 were in relation to OPP policy. One of them was a service complaint on what the organization should be doing or is not doing. And one is conduct, which is officer being challenged on the type of conduct they had while they're interacting with a member of the public. I hope that answers, but if you need more detailed answer, I can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Inspector, and thank you, Vice Chair Bhatia. Any other comment to this report? If not, then may I have a mover to receive this report by Mr. Boughton? Do we have seconder? Seconded by Mr. Howell. All in favor? Okay, this is carried. All in favor? Yeah, this is carried. That pretty much concludes, but before we move further, I quickly wants to acknowledge on the behalf of our board the tragic death of Inspector Mark, OPP Inspector Mark Hovinge, who unfortunately killed in the line of duty. And we want to pay our respect and tribute to the OPP officer, as we have OPP officers here. If Chief, thank you for the reminder. You want to make a comment, or anyone makes a quick comment, I'll be more than happy.
Chief Peer? Your microphone's off, sir.
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. First of all, I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in the meeting today and bring greetings on behalf of all of our officers and civilian staff in Central Regional OPP. Thank you very much for your comments with respect to Constable Mark Hovinge. We are having the funeral tomorrow, so we'll have many sites that we'll be utilizing to remember Mark and pay tribute to him. So thank you very much. And we've had a lot of critical incidents lately with respect to the OPP. So we're coming together as an organization, and we really appreciate the support of all of our partners as we navigate those waters. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Peer. Chief Nish, you want to make a quick comment as well?
Yes, thanks, Chief Superintendent and Chair. We as a police organization support our brothers and sisters in policing and want to acknowledge several members of the OPP that have been affected, inclusive of the tragic death, but another OPP officer injured yesterday. So our flags are at half staff. We know during the pandemic, we can't physically congregate at the funeral. The funeral will be, as communicated, will be televised. We have two of our officers, ceremonial officers, attending Aurelia to commemorate it, but on behalf of our organization and our community, we know it inclusive of the board. We just want to convey our condolences to the family and the broader family. I spoke to OPP Commissioner Tom Creek several times this week and offered our assistance in any capacity, and as has the rest of the police community. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief and Chief Superintendent. So that concludes the Section 10 Caledon OPP agenda. Thank you, Inspector Garrett and Chief Superintendent Perry, for taking the time to attend
Thank you,
our
Chair.
board meeting today.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So now we will begin with the Peel Police Services Board meeting of November 27. Roll call, all members present. Yes. And is there any declaration of conflict of interest? Seeing, hearing none. The first item will be the approval of the minutes of the meeting held on Friday, October 23rd, 2020. If no question, may I have a mover? Moved by Mayor Crombie. Do we have seconders? Seconded by Mr. Boughton. All in favor? This is carried and this is approved. Now we have the next item. We have board member question announcement. Do we have any, a member has any question or announcements to make? Seeing, hearing none. And the second item is in the agenda. We have two deputations included in our agenda. The deputation have been sent to each board members and appear on a public agenda as well. The first deputation is from the Stop Police Profiling and Workplace Abuse Group. So, board member, is there any question or comment regarding this deputation? Yes, Regional Chair Unica, please.
Chair, thank you. And I think I may have asked this before, but just some clarity. First of all, I think I should start by saying, in fairness to the deputant, in the normal world, in the non-COVID virtual world, I'm assuming they or the group would be before us, they would identify themselves. So in fairness to the deputant, you can't blame them for that not being the case.
Exactly.
So the concern that I have, though, is that there isn't a name or an address or an associate or somebody that we can report back to as to what we're doing, unless they're tuning in, and I'm assuming they're tuning in. And that brings me to a very specific example in the letter that gives me more concern, that we don't have a feedback mechanism. So in reading the letter, and by the way, I thought some very good points were made in the letter, but something that jumps out at me is point 8 that was made in the letter that reads, and I quote, that there be a conflict of interest law be put into place that excludes police from being the personal attendants of MPPs and other politicians. It has been found in the past that politicians have used police as a tool to gag free speech of constituents, to further their own agendas, and to avoid hearing opposing points of view. Now, what is intriguing, and words matter, in the very next sentence, they express another concern, but they start with, there is a clear impression. Your impressions are your own, I understand that. They didn't start this sentence with that. They state it as a statement of fact. So here's the challenge that I have, and I think it's a challenge my elected officials on the board share, Mayor Crombie, Mayor Brown. This is a very serious allegation that's said plain, plump, and proper, that politicians and MPPs or other politicians are using the police to protect them in the matter described. If the deputant was before me, I'd be saying that's a very serious allegation. You're stating it as a statement of fact. Can you please substantiate it? And if you can, we've got something to do here. We've got to fix this up. This is unacceptable. But the problem I have is, as a chair of the region, 24 politicians I work for could be included in this group, but nobody's named. The incidents aren't reported to. So it paints us all with the same brush, number one. And number two, if I don't draw attention to it here, it looks like I've sort of whitewashed it over as well, and I don't want to deal with it. Pardon me. So it leaves me in quite a predicament when you make a statement like that. I can't get back to the person making the statement. And if you leave it unchallenged or unquestioned, it's like right after this meeting, did you see they just received the letter and didn't do anything? So it's an awkward set of circumstances. In my previous life, in 30 years as a counselor, one of the first things that I would always ask is the very first line, on behalf of the Stop Police Profiling Group. And again, with no membership list, I'd love to see a membership list. I'd love to see the minutes of your last meeting. I'd love to see the minutes of your last annual general meeting. And that tells me you're an ongoing concern. I have a feedback mechanism, but here, this really doesn't serve anybody's purposes. And if I don't draw attention to it, I almost feel like I'm complicit. So I'm going to leave it at that and end up where I started. In fairness to the writer, they have every right to say, Chair, I might have been in front of you, if not but for COVID. You would have known who the record starts with, give us your name, your address. So a bit unfair to all of us, and I acknowledge that. I'm going to leave it at that. But going forward, this really puts us all in an awkward situation, because if we don't deal with it, we look like we're part of the conspirators, and yet we want to genuinely get to the bottom of this. If there's bad politicians, let's deal with them. If there's police doing things, but this doesn't give me much to go on. And so I just make those points out of sincerity to a deputant that I think is
this part of the pandemic, we have seen benefits for them. And so I think if we can raise some pressure.
Sorry, Mayor Brown, if you can please mute your
issue,
microphone.
I don't care who gets.
Are you done, Chair Unica? Sorry about that. Any other question or comment by any other board member? Mayor Crombie? No? Yes, Mr. Howell?
Well, Nando raises some very valid points here. Would it be possible that we could address the complainants and invite them to speak before the panel or the next meeting, or ask them to expand on their complaint?
Okay. Any other member wishes to make a comment? Okay, if not, may I have a mover to receive this deputation?
Chair, if I may, I'd be happy to move it, but I'd want the minutes to show, I think Member Howell's made a great point, and that as part of the discussion, we wanted more information. We wanted to follow up with you somehow, if that can be made available. So happy to move receipt, and that in the conversation that did come up, we want to reach out to you and try to address what you're saying, but we need your help to work on this collaboratively. So if the record could show, as Member Howell has said as well, I'm happy to move it with that caveat. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I guess Mr. Serpe will follow up in regards to that. Do we have a seconder on this deputation to receive moved by Regional Chair Unica, seconded by Mr. Boughton? All in favor? Okay, this is carried and approved. The second deputation is from the Advocacy Peel and QTI BIPOC Saga Group. Do we have any comments or anything in regards to this deputation as well? Seeing, hearing none. May I have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive this report? Moved by Regional Chair Unica. Do we have a seconder for this report to receive? May I have a seconder? Seconded by Mr. Atia. All in favor? This is carried. So quickly, that concludes our deputations. In the previous section, in the announcement, I just quickly, I think the Chief wanted to make an announcement. Chief, if you can please proceed.
So Ron, before the chief speaks, just on this deputation, if we just backtrack for a moment, because they've asked that the deputation be read out loud in the letter. I think it's important to note this deputation is available to the public, right?
Yes,
Cool.
and it's also online available for the public, and we received all the deputations.
And I think on point number 1 in that deputation, maybe the chief can offer some update on that issue. Right, like there are responses to these points. Like I want it to be noted that we have taken action. Like there is movement, and some of these issues are priorities for us, and there are updates. So wherever there is something that the chief can comment on, it would be helpful if he does.
Sure, Mr. Atia. So thank you for your input. Now back to the announcements section, Chief, if you can please continue with your announcement.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, board members. I just want to take an opportunity to introduce a new face that's on the call, and he may have disappeared, but it's Mr. Tony Ventura, who is I'd like to introduce as our newly promoted Director of Information Technology. As you know, we made significant reorganization this year under Deputy O'Duarte's command for innovation and technology. So Tony is here. He's a longstanding member of the organization, has advanced through it. So we want to welcome him here. Some very quick verbal updates I just wanted to share with the board. As you know, last week we made a significant public announcement at the conclusion of a project Siphon, which deserves just the acknowledgement for the board members and our public. Many conversations since my arrival a year ago have been about the propensity for gang and gun violence in the GTA. We know both the chair and the mayors, Chair Yanika, had attended a big city conference with the big city mayors and police chiefs talking about what we could do for gun and gang violence. And we committed to redress some of the 34 homicides and some of the worst gang shootings last year that have plagued this region for over the years. And I just want to acknowledge that last week represented the conclusion of Project Siphon, which was the name provided to probably an over 1 year project. And Nick, I know I want to invite Nick to speak to this. We do have one slide that I'd like to share with the board, and it represents the outcome of the work we're doing. Chair Chadha, is the gang violence reduction strategy visible to you?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Deputy Milinovich to unmute. It not only represents the bottom line, the toolbar, it represents the outcomes of this project. And I first need to acknowledge this is the largest gun and gang project in Peel Region's history, probably one of the largest in the GTA. There were 88 people arrested. We do know that there are more forthcoming, over 800 charges. And I need to highlight, out of it are at least 3 or 4 homicide investigations that were resolved out of it. And we do believe that there will be more, 1 attempt murder, 34 illegal handguns. And I need to highlight that 91% of the illegal firearms that we seized came from the US. We know that this has been a topic of discussion in the past. There were assault rifles, fully automatic modified handguns, which were used in public. But all too often we've seen gun and gang violence, the response by police agencies to be a gang sweep. We close the book and move on. And this is what we want to highlight here. And you as a board and us as an organization want to really demonstrate. You brought me here and a new team here to show the evolution of policing and our response to violence. We want to apply the community safety well-being framework to this issue. And this is our unveiling of our violence reduction strategy. And I'd like to introduce Nick to briefly speak on that as part of our verbal updates. We know it's a communication piece we just can't let go past with just a media release last week. So Nick.
Thank you, Chief, and through the chair, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the Police Services Board about this. And really, my reason for wanting to do that is to remind, despite the incredible results, Project Siphon has made a huge difference in our community. But it is not just your typical gang sweep. As a police service, we don't view this as the end of a project. We really view this as the beginning of a strategy. And, you know, our intent is to build that strategy into some of the curriculum, like a comprehensive plan on how we can begin to address gun and gang violence and start bringing some of those numbers down. So on the left-hand side, you can see some of the data that we've collected. And you see that in 2020, we're starting to see a decrease, but really the data and the analysis that we've done has helped inform some of the strategy. And Project Siphon is one piece intended to enhance our ability to respond to the emergencies and intervene in the emergencies that gun and gang violence creates. Peel's a large municipality. We do have some of those pressures that we need to make sure that we assess our programming and assess what we're doing and make sure we're effective. Project Siphon falls within those two categories. But there's a huge piece that we also have to consider. We have created a void through this project. There's a space, and now what we need to do is begin assessing how we plan on filling that space. And you'll see as part of our gang strategy that we're looking at opportunities to prevent people from entering the lifestyle. That's a huge issue. We want to engage in awareness campaigns. We want to work with the community to inform our community about some of the risks as it relates to gun and gang violence. Some may have seen the short video vignette that we did that really talked about some of the results of Project Siphon. That was intended to bring awareness to the issue and begin the conversation. It had a reach of 8.3 million, which is pretty incredible. And it's a good place to start the conversation. Social development and an investment in our communities. That's another critical piece of our strategy. And when you consider all of these things together, our intent is to provide a more balanced curriculum aimed at making the community a safer, more healthy place. And we will be one of the first services to, in a very genuine way, apply the principles of community safety and well-being planning to a gang violence reduction strategy. And the other reason why I wanted to have this slide up here and have the conversation is I really feel it's necessary to understand that we're not just going to take this approach in gang violence and a strategy for reduction of that violence. We're going to apply it in other areas too. Our intimate partner violence. We plan on building a strategy and a comprehensive one informed by some of the data to make a difference there and partner with our partners in doing that. Also human trafficking. So this is an approach that we're weaving into our service delivery model. And thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak to it, Chief.
Thank you, Nick. And I trust that you will see now the artifacts out of our commitment to community safety well-being more visible as it pertains to a long-standing initiative to make our communities more resilient and safer. And the same thing applies this week. Chair Yanika, we know the region announced to commemorate intimate partner violence and the discussion on It's Not Okay for International Day of Elimination of Violence Against Women. We have, as you know, before the board, discussions on bolstering our dedicated intimate partner violence unit. So thank you for the opportunities. And just to wrap up a couple of quick discussion points, I just want to acknowledge that under the school resource officer discussion point, which we know is at the forefront of many individuals, we did communicate publicly this week that we intend, and we did in June, dissolve our school resource programming with the intent of being informed by the public on how we can better serve youth and youth engagement. We do believe it's important to have a youth engagement program. We know we have the support of both private schools and other school boards to participate in this discussion. We do intend on using that information and coming back to our stakeholders with a new iteration and a possible new format for providing youth engagement. So that's just an acknowledgement as it speaks, especially the delegations that we've heard. I also want to acknowledge that in September 2014, tragically, two of our officers were called to a mental health dispute and a domestic dispute, which resulted in the death of an individual. This week we heard the SIU, or last week we heard the SIU conclude their investigation as it is pertaining to their mandate into the death of this individual. They found that there was no wrongdoing on behalf of the officers, no criminal acts of the officers. And I just want to acknowledge that it took 14 months for the SIU to conclude this investigation. We all agree, and Director Martino and I have spoken numerous times about the value of expediency and information to the public, and in the context of increasing public confidence, but also in showcasing the actions of our officers. In this case, we know that the officers acted as consummate professionals, demonstrated the best of their training in this situation, and sadly, the individual passed, as the pathologist indicated, to a variety or a confluence of medical conditions aggravated by substance abuse as well. So despite that, two of our officers have been impacted by the same silence that the public experiences, and it barely got the interest of media. Despite that, we are in front of the media all day long for a variety of different reasons, and rightfully so. We're in a profession that deserves a high level of public accountability and independent governance. And here we've seen a process conclude just as it was legislated. However, when our officers are, cleared, we don't often get the acknowledgement. So I just want to say, there are many efforts to speed up the resourcing for the SIU so that they can conclude these high-profile investigations. But want to acknowledge in a very appropriate format that this one was concluded, and the officers, I've spoken to both of them, are relieved and are continuing on with their duties just as they always have. On a positive note, I also want to acknowledge that we've had two officers receive a significant recognition, and the first is one that you have seen several times, and it's Detective Sergeant Ferris Ishmael. He is a member of our community engagement group. He received the International Association of Chiefs of Police Civil and Human Rights Award. And I think we all need to quickly pause here. It did get some media attention, but as you know, for policing in Ontario, we have the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. We have a Canadian association, but internationally, for 165 countries, there's only one entity, and that's the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police. They select only one individual a year globally to get recognized for this Civil and Human Rights Award, and that went to a Peel Regional Police member. And this individual, as you know, has been working heavily with our communities on hate and biased crime, responding to a variety of different engagement with our diverse communities. He, inside and outside of work, volunteers his time, was recently promoted. And we just want to acknowledge that, we have to take stock and celebrate the good work, because there's a lot of our members that, day in and day out, despite the pandemic, despite, a very difficult year for policing, have relentlessly pursued work as individuals and as teams, as we've seen, as inclusive of this project that Nick just talked about. The second is Constable Manjit Basaran. He is one of our officers, really deeply connected with the Sikh community, was one of two individuals since to receive ever is the Global News Greater Toronto Award for Community Engagement. And what he's been doing since 2014 is on his own time working to serve meals in the food security space outside of his work, like many of our individuals volunteering in the community, and over 100,000 meals served. He also is a deep connect with the Sikh community between us and as it pertains to issues, and we want to acknowledge him as well. So with that, thank you, Chair, for letting me indulge the board with a couple of verbal updates. I know as we have really meaty, tangible business to get to, I think it'd be an opportunity to communicate those things to you.
Yes, thank you, Chief. I'll be quickly going to Mr. Boughton. I also, on behalf of the board, want to pass my congratulations to both Officer Basran and Ish, and we want to obviously congratulate them and best wishes. Mr. Boughton, to you, sir.
Chief, on Project Siphon, you had stated that I think of all the firearms that were seized, 74% of them from the U.S. I think that was the number, correct?
Yeah, and you know, Mr. Bowden, last year 74% what we seized were from the U.S. Out of this seizure, 91 thus far this year, 91% of the handguns we've seized this year are from that are traceable or back from the U.S.
Okay, would it be fair to assume that none of the guns that were seized were from of individuals who possess them legally?
Nick, unless you can clarify otherwise about the remaining.
That would be correct, sir.
Yeah, I think it would be useful because for that information to be shared. The reason being that the Liberal government on the federal level is passing that responsibility down to municipalities to decide whether they will ban handguns in each of their jurisdictions, kind of stepped away from, which means that it's going to fall back on the mayors and whatever to do it. I think it was very useful to understand what the sources are of these handguns that are seized, or these weapons, and that they are actually not from people who legally possess them. Because you know, just people who don't have guns just look at it and think nobody should have a gun, but where these come from need to be clearly identified when you have like Project Siphon or any of the other projects.
Yes, thank you, sir. And we continue to keep you know, the origins of the firearms in hand. Chief Saunders, before he retired, and the Greater Toronto related chiefs with the mayors did author communication to Public Safety Canada, Minister Blair, as it pertains to opportunities to strengthen the mechanisms of how firearms enter here. As you know, the longest border possible with the U.S. is a difficult one to mitigate. Comes through air, parcel vehicles, train, sea, you know, you name it, and sometimes in pieces. So, you know, there is and as you can see, the new unionized entity for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they never had an association. They've taken a very strong advocacy as it pertains to investments at the border related to, you know, specifically firearms. We recognize where the source is coming from. We understand that not one solution will prevent firearms offenses, but we do know we need to go where the risk is, and that clearly the data is very helpful in that regard.
That's great. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Boughton, and thank you, Chief. If no further comment, I would like to move into the next item, which is number 3, the presentations. Our next item is the presentation of the 2021 Peel Regional Police budget. Chief, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Chadha, and it's my pleasure to again introduce Ms. Carrie Lynn Holmes, our Director of Finance Planning. She represents her significant team that has been involved, as you know, in the budget process from its inception. And just to recap, you know, this presentation that we are now presenting to the board was received by the Finance Audit Committee on November 9th and approved at that date. But for clarification for the board members, you will have seen a revised report included, and that reflects a reduction to anticipated hydro costs that we had post November 9th received information from the region. So that's resulted in a reduction of our budget from a 400,000, which really doesn't, in the end, impact the net tax levy, but it does result in an amended board report. So with that, I'd like to say that this budget that's being presented represents, as you can see, 462.5 million, and which is a 3.8% increase over last year for us. It equates to a 3% net tax levy for the public. And in this slide, Carrie Lynn and I will sort of, jump back and forth as we speak to some of them. This budget here is less than the 4% that we forecasted. And as we get through the presentation, we'll be able to unpack how we got to the 3%, 3.8%, which represents 16.7 million. And within it, translates into 27 uniform officers to speak to some of the demands that I will address. In addition is the 10-year capital plan, totaling 597.5 million, funded by our reserves to deliver the infrastructure and equipment required to continue our operations over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. So as we begin, I think it'd be critical to just frame up where we were at 1 year ago. As you recall, it would have been week number 2 or 3 for me, coming to Interim Chief Chris McCord had the opportunity to present to the board, and then as it proceeded to the region, we had a lot of we knew where our demands were, but I think as we move forward, I just want to reflect on 2020, what's happened since I've sort of been on ground with this new team in the organization. Quite significantly, we have adopted a community safety wellbeing plan, which the region of Peel and the Police Services Board, as mandated by the Police Services Act, have approved in October, which is a significant milestone. And again, I want to acknowledge that very few police services boards in regions have completed their community safety wellbeing plan during the pandemic. In fact, I think the chair and the mayors would be able to attest from their colleagues that many municipalities asked for extensions due to the pandemic. But this year we can reflect that, given all the pressures, we knew this year more than ever, with the interim CEO Nancy Polsinelli, Chair Unica, and the 2 municipalities, we were able to continue to press through to bring this to fruition. You've seen how that's been even used in the gang violence strategy. So this is significant because we've adopted it within the organization. As you remember, you commissioned me almost in my first board meeting to do a service delivery review, which resulted in 16 recommendations, which we'll talk about. I think Mark is going to speak to something a little later. But I also undertook a grassroots to top of the organization's SWOT analysis. And out of this is members have told us what we need to do organizationally. And that's a full project with 160 recommendations. And as you move around the bottom left side of this infographics, of course, I won't go into every one, but road safety, number 1, we know we've got a lot of tragic death. Mental health and intimate partner violence aligns deeply with the region's priorities and motions, their action tables, and the violent crime strategy, which Nick spoke to. We closed the book on that, CCDI survey, which, I don't want to say lingered, but it did point to areas and opportunities for this organization to really make an influence. And we've got an equity, diversity, inclusion manager that we hired this year. We've got a roadmap that we presented to the board earlier this year that the board approved. That's going to carry us on into many years. We've got probably a 40 or 50 person equity, diversity, inclusion council of members, a cross-section civilian and sworn. We've redeployed officers to investigative. And then, nonetheless, the innovation technology that you as a board have authorized to commence with is our business intelligence and the body worn cameras, approval of those board reports, as well as our roadmap for our long-term facilities plans. Next slide. And quickly, you know, when I arrived and our team got formalized, you know, we put a lot of emphasis on our community, internally our people and our work. And we just want to highlight that the board did approve its strategic plan. And it's a strategic plan that looks unlike many of the ones that have ever existed here in Peel Regional Police. And this slide just highlights just, you know, graphically the three big pillars that we are going to be embarking on between now and 2023. I hope you see these tenets in our budget, because I think the community has asked us to say, hey, you know, what are your priorities? Are your budgets considerate of the needs and risks in our community? Are they contemporary? Are they flexible? And I think, you know, we're pleased to say that you will see the footprint of that here. Next slide, please. The next slide just reflects, and I'd love to have Anthony take a left turn. We know the board did hear on our approach to digital innovation and technology, but that, you know, we wanted to move from reactive to proactive. And to take Anthony's a quote is, we're not just catching up Peel Regional Police to where we should be from an innovation technology, is we want to go into the future and be leaders in innovation. And it is not about the bright, shiny thing. This is about enhancing community safety. From the day I've spoken to you, and probably since my interview, I've said technology can be a platform for improving community safety, improving public confidence, improving the way our officers are able to serve the community. And you can see all of it is, you know, in one calendar year, we have taken on more transformation from a technology standpoint than this organization has probably in the last 14, 15, 20 years. So, you know, just a re-emphasis, and that is things we've done within budget this year, being good stewards of what has been provided to us last year when I came to Regional Council. Next slide, please. Again, I think from a graphic standpoint, we talk about community safety well-being. It really is just the four rings, a planning principle that we can apply at the macro level, at the micro level. Here at Peel Regional Police, the deputies, myself, our team, we've gone to all our troops and civilians and said, hey, where can the emphasis be? And we continue to ask the public, are we missing anything here? But we're quite confident. These are the four big priority areas: mental health addictions, road safety, violent crime, and our priority populations. And we'll speak to priority populations later because that's sort of an ambiguous term. But within that, and we're not discounting, you know, theft from automobiles in a certain ward of our region, that's important. But when we talk about risk, these are certainly the biggest risks that we have. Everything is important to us. But what you'll see is, if you tap to the next, is that these are the region's priorities. The region of Peel, through the region of the community safety wellbeing plan, there is a direct connect. You know, mental health addictions, family violence, systemic discrimination are the action tables that the region has committed to. There's several motions by the region that speak to all of these, and they have a dotted line connection to our activities. So you can see what the community safety wellbeing plan is bringing alignment from our work to the region's work. And this is what, you know, Nancy and I continue to challenge our other stakeholders is there's an opportunity for health, school systems, education, you know, community, social services, transit, you name it, to align their priorities to the broader ones. Next slide, please. As a highlight of one of our key pressures, and all of us know this year more than any, and it's not just as a result of perhaps some tragic instances that have got the public's attention, is our interaction with mental health. Again, the Mental Health Act only legislates the police as the entity to take people to hospital in crisis, which we know we need to show the shift to other community agencies and services where they can and appropriately are. But while this remains our priority, we are not just going to stand by. We're going to enhance our service delivery. And as you can see, we still have about 16 mental health apprehensions a day. That's not just the calls we're going to. These are the individuals that, you know, we feel need to get help. We're thankful that the mobile crisis rapid response teams are in hand, because they actually represent a significant impact on how we respond to crisis response. Before they existed, what happened is about 75% of the time, officers would take somebody to the hospital. And we've all seen those photos of officers outside the hospital, up to 16 cruisers. Now that we have a crisis worker, and mind you, not enough, it's not the optimal, but now that we have a crisis worker with an officer, a trained officer, 22% of the time, somebody goes to the hospital. And to unpack that, what that means is the right people at the right time are going to the hospital. Police officers are not the optimal mental health trained professionals. You know, we are the 24/7 go-to with paramedics and fire, but when it goes to show you, when you have the right provider triaging, and there will be times that we have to be there because the violence is at its worst or the risk is at its worst, but where it's appropriate, we can get the people to the right service. Now, can I tell you, the other times, the crisis worker is actually making a referral to connection to services, which they can do kind of on spot, which is an amazing activity. And we also have a COAST, the COAST, which is a crisis outreach and support team. They're in non-crisis. Mark Andrews and our team have been working with the hospital transfer protocol, which I told you upon my arrival had significant impacts. We have up to sometimes 5 hours that officers are sitting in a hospital with somebody. The average is a 2.5 hour wait time. We have been able to successfully pilot with William Osler the transfer protocol, and we're hoping to achieve that with Trillium. We know the pandemic is a priority, but we've been able to say that now we're down to an average in Osler for around just less than an hour. Mark, is that correct? Mark Andrews?
Chief, it's just around 60 minutes.
60 minutes. So thank you for that. I know I asked him to pop in here just for a brief, but this is our strategy that we're working on. And we have a mental health crisis worker that's looking at other cases, looking at referrals. Again, we want to say to the public, there's a huge focus on de-escalation. We know we don't want to criminalize people and send them into the court system, and obviously an outcome that protects everybody to its best. The next slide, please. And Carrie Lynn, I'm sorry, I know I'm doing all the talking, but let me know if I've missed anything.
Yeah, that's okay.
Road safety. I just want to first acknowledge that I think we are probably, sadly, at one of the highest levels of fatal motor vehicle collisions this region has ever seen. We've had 32 fatal collisions, which actually represents 38 fatalities and deaths. It's a 93% increase from last year. And if you just also stop to think about what we've heard from our community during the pandemic, with the reduction of volume of traffic, the stunt driving, we've seen the street racing, charges increase, the drifting organizers with the large projects that we've seen that we've at the bottom right that have got media attention. Road noise, we can hear road noise more. It's a wellness issue for our residents right across the region. We've recognized that it requires more attention outside of the day-to-day calls for service. And we've had to reallocate throughout the year 16 additional officers to road safety to do these things. And I want to say the Take the Pledge campaign still continues. We want to encourage the public to do that. We've had many politicians, municipal, provincial, our mayors participate in it, and we want people to slow down. And in the meantime, we'll continue our joint forces investigations with the OPP in York. Project Erase, for example, has 4,000 vehicles stopped, over 2,000 just on its own charged. That continues to be demand, as we all know. Next slide, please. As it pertains to violent crime, not to double down on what Nick introduced, we have seen 14 homicides. 5 of the 14 are intimate partner, but 90 shootings and 474 rounds. In the end, there are victims, and we want to acknowledge our paramedics and our healthcare professionals. We can say without a doubt, without them, that homicide rate would be higher. The quicker you can get to Sunnybrook, we know the greater chance that you can survive. This continues to be an issue for us. So we have the gun and gang initiatives, as you've seen. We participated with Toronto Police on their Project Sunder, which also had over 100 arrests. We have the establishment of our compliance STEP teams, a gang-related intelligence team, and we do have a plan to bolster our gang response. We know a dedicated gang team is one we need for the new year, and that's part of our strategy. And in it here, the CCTV program, all these things are continued pressure. We, outside of Toronto, have the highest gun and gang violence in this province. Next slide. And we would be remiss to say that we do still have a need to serve our communities. And this slide just captures under priority populations, our youth engagement, older adult isolation, our diverse communities, the development of a situation table, which is our hub that we're working with the region and the United Way to do. Next slide, please. Within this year, not just because of our commitment to innovation and technology, I committed to you and to the board that we would look at how we're utilizing our people internally. So I commissioned a complete staffing review. We do anticipate that in the new year that there will be, I'll report back to the board on additional efficiencies that we have identified, where we say, technology and innovation have changed the way people work, and we want them to be utilized to their fullest, and we don't have to do things the way we've done before. So we redirected 9 positions and able to reallocate them to higher priorities. So for example, less administrative staff to fill needs in IT and analytics. And this is an ongoing project. And the dollar value, of course, for that is just shy of $1 million within this calendar year that we've been able to reallocate. Next slide, please. So, as I've spoken to you about mental health and the crisis response teams, we know it is understaffed and we need to increase them. It's contingent on our partner at CMHA also meeting us halfway with the equivalent number of bodies. They thankfully are receiving through the province some one-time grant funding to increase. It's not going to get us to the optimal number, but our goal is to have 8 on our rapid response teams. We know we were the last probably GTA service to have a committed intimate partner family violence unit. Still here in Peel Region, all the way to recently, a frontline officer from the time they received the call till the time that they, dealt with intimate partner violence, had to handle the call front to back. And not that they were incapable of doing that, but if you think about the number of homicides we had, 14 intimate partner family homicides last year, intimate partner violence is still the top 3 calls that we go to a day. We need to turn the dial on this, and being able to have a dedicated officers that know how to deal with victims, stop the repeat violence. As recently as last weekend, and I want to thank and acknowledge board member Mr. Boughton for his navigation with the family. I was on CTV, W5, speaking to intimate partner violence and the repeat offenders that, and sadly in this one case, took the life of Darylyn Reed, who the offender was just recently out on a gun charge and on his third or fourth breach of recognizance for intimate partner violence. And if we had the dedicated resources to be able to look at these repeated circumstances and take them offline, that's what we need to do. But we don't want to just do that within our four walls. We're taking these 48 officers and embedding them akin to our community safety plan with other agencies, with the community, not-for-profit agencies at Peel Safe Center. We're working with them, a great organization with lots of entities there to provide supports from counseling, youth-based, employment transition, safety nets, health, and have our officers it'll be one of a kind here in Peel to be in the community. Road safety, nonetheless, I spoke to you, adding 16 officers. And we know, and Chair Yanika could speak to it, he knows that the growth data from the province shows significant growth for the region. This continues to happen. As well as, I have a commitment to improve our divisional mobilization units. And we deconstructed our traditional neighborhood policing units, the youth programming, community officers. We re-centralized them under the Community Safety Wellbeing Branch. And that's 47 officers. And of course, this region still has individuals that have to wait 5 hours for an officer to come and take a report for a break and enter, and where there's no suspect on scene. The demands of people waiting probably in the hundreds. Recently got data on break and enters that are outliers. At least, in 2019, there were at least 122 people that were delayed up to 5 to 7 hours from having an officer come to their doorstep. And that service delivery is unacceptable. So, this picture shows you the work by myself and our team to say, we need to be flexible in year to adjust our service delivery to the needs. And that amounts to about 210 officers that we had within ourselves and reallocated to bigger priorities. And if I can get the next graphics, that represents 183 that we were able to do within our reach. And about 27 we know will be a pressure for us into the new year, and you'll see this. And this represents roughly $25 million, $24.7 million of human resources within this calendar year that we reallocated to show flexibility to the needs we've got. And we are coming to the board for the 27. As we know, we continue to grow and have a lot of pressures. Next slide, please. And this following slide speaks to what some of the growth pressures do look like. Just, statistically, the 1.4% population growth is 20,000. And we know, practically speaking, it is more than that in the high density residences, the number of households increasing, as well as registered vehicles. And our representation of growth is 1.3% in staffing, in keeping with that. Next slide, please. So if I've lost any of the board members, I just really wanted to hone in on this slide. This is an extremely important one. I know Mayor Brown has pointed this out to us. We have received this calendar year our new officer to population. It's our COP to POP, as we call it, for 100,000 data. And it just got received. So in 2019, this is what we know, is that Peel has one of the lowest COP to POP ratios in policing across the largest organizations. And you can see that we have, Peel as a 1.4 million population, and we've got York at 1.2, and Ottawa just under 900,000, the city itself is there. And so, the reason this is important is that for how we utilize resources, and the cop to pop is not the best indicator, but it is a reflection of how we're doing from Stats Canada as it relates to the other agencies. And the asterisk speaks to the two police agencies that have a municipal policing demand at an airport. And so, Carolyn, can you just confirm we backed that data out of there?
That's right, sir. We took a number of airport officers, police at the airport, because the GTAA pays for that, as well as Montreal and Calgary because they're in similar situations.
So yes, thank you for that, Calgary as well. So the other agencies that have airports have the RCMP separately policing them. Can I have the next slide, please? And as you can see, the top 4 largest municipal police agencies in Canada are listed here, and we are still reasonably significantly lower from a cop to pop as it pertains to Calgary. So Calgary has probably plus or minus 1.4 million in the city as well, and it would take us an additional 266 officers in this next budget ask to just even to catch up to it. And for reference, to catch up to Montreal would be over 1,000 officers. And the demands of each community are different, their needs are different, and you can't compare them like for like. But if the closest to the top 4 or 5 municipal agencies, even to catch up to Toronto, would be up to closely 400, and Edmonton is probably 600. Next slide, please. So as we bring it back to the conclusion of our presentation, we just want to unpack to you what our budget ask of 3.8% is. 2.6% of it itself is the negotiated salaries and benefits, which we know were ratified this calendar year. And 0.1% pertains to and Carolyn, you can unpack that for us. It's licensing and fees.
Yes, Chief. The $100,000 is mainly driven by software maintenance. We have increases in our contracts in regards to software maintenance, and it's offset by that $400,000 in salary.
Great, thank you. And then, as indicated, based on our pressures and demands, is the 27 officers, which represent 1.2% of that budget. Next slide, please. Now, Carolyn, I think I'm not sure the audio is clear for you. You can help me speak to this. We did want to speak to some of the risks as we look at the 2021 budget. We do know that provincial grant funding on an annual basis is always one that is an uncertainty. We have built in a base budgeting based on what we know are the grants that we provided this year. And I think I need to highlight how significant the grant funding is. For example, I think, grant funding for us represents about, 3% of our budget. And when you look at some of the programming, for example, at health at the region side is close to 60% of it, if I've got it correct, Carrie Lynn. So it is very critical to us. A slight adjustment. We've received notification from the province that they are currently reviewing the court security and prisoner transportation grant funding. So that is, it expires December 31st of this year, and we receive roughly 9 million annually on that. In 2019, there was a shortfall that we saw a reduction in it. There is some consternation across other police organizations that we may see a reduction as well in keeping with that. I do want to indicate that we have, thankfully, based on a great relationship with the province, received significant one-time grant funding, which is about 1.1 million. And that is inclusive of things like our CCTV cameras, the gang intervention, youth engagement, gang response, Project Haven, which is a human trafficking project. Carolyn, can I turn it over to you to speak to some of the impacts for COVID as it pertains to our current budget this year, and then what we expect for next year?
Yes. So for next year, in regards to COVID, our strategy will be first to utilize any funding that becomes available from the province through the region to be able to access that. If at the end of the day we do see a shortfall, we would be able to draw upon our working funds reserves to cover that off. This year we have incurred expenses related to COVID, and we're anticipating, when we include capital and operating expenditures, for about $4.4 million. Luckily, this year we have seen some significant savings in our benefits, so that's offsetting those expenses. So we are at this time still projecting that we will come in on budget for 2020.
Thank you, Carolyn. And can we have the next slide, please? And maybe, Carolyn, I'll ask you to speak to this as well. We've been discussing a 2021 budget, but here are the projected increases for our forecast.
So the region requests us to do a forecast. So, 2021, we've requested 27 officers. We are forecasting the same for the years 2022 and 2024, and that basically results in a 4% increase for each of those years. As you mentioned, Chief, we do have ratified collective agreements, so we've been able to forecast out those costs, and those are reflected in this forecast at this time. Next slide, please. So this represents our 10-year capital plan of $597.5 million. As the Chief mentioned earlier, this is fully funded through our reserve. You can see the major drivers obviously being land and facilities at just over $300 million, information and technology to $153 million, and the replacement of vehicles at $76.2. There's also some equipment for communications, our VCOM, which is we are partnered with the municipalities and some other services on that, as well as the airport of $3 million, and that's fully funded through the TTAA. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the capital plan, the 10-year plan, is fully funded through our infrastructure reserves. We're projecting at December 31st this year, our balance will be $172 million. But as you'll see over the next 10 years, we do have some significant expenses coming through. And by 2030, that balance will be down to $59 million. We were, because of the significant spending that we see coming through for IT and facilities, have increased annual contributions starting in 2022 to help fund those expenses. So we will see an increase of $6 million over the years in reserve contribution. Next slide, please. Did you want me to get the summary, Chief, or do you want to?
Sure, Carolyn.
I can do it if you want.
Yep, go ahead, and I'll close off with some comments on behalf of myself and Mr. Bowden.
Okay. So as we mentioned, our 2021 budget ask is $462.5 million. It's a 3% net tax levy increase for $316.47 per capita cost. The increase of $16.7 million or 3.8% is less than what we told you last year of 4%. Capital plan totals $597.5 million and is fully funded through our reserves. Our next step after this is the Chief is scheduled to attend Regional Council on February 4th to present the budget to Council. After this, if everything is approved, we'll be forwarding the package to the region for consolidation within their budget document, which is slated to be issued to councillors early January. Chief?
Thank you, Carolyn, and we want to thank the board for the opportunity to present the budget. I've had significant discussions with the chair of the Finance, Audit, and Risk Committee, Mr. Boughton, who has worked with our team to flesh through a lot of the nuances. And with that, we'll turn it back to you, Chair Chadha.
Thank you, Chief, and the entire team, and especially on the behalf of the board, I want to thank our member, Mr. Al Boughton, for putting everything together and helping it out and spending a lot of time in this on this much needed budgeting for the upcoming year. So, board members, any question or comment? I'm sure I still see this presentation screen here, so I can't see the entire board members. Yes, now it's better. So board members, I'm sure there will be comments or question. If there's any, you're more than welcome. Chief, this is really some of the, especially the service delivery you touched, and especially the 5 hours wait time roughly we have right now for break in and enter, as you mentioned. That's a lot of time. Sometimes the property owners, and I notice at the first hand, listening from the people, sometimes if it's a little longer, then all those fingerprints and all those evidence can be tampered. So it's good that we are working towards it, and we acknowledge how we can do better in the upcoming years. Board members, any question or comment in regards to this? This is the time. Yes, Mr. Boughton. Please, yeah.
Thank you, Chair Chadha. And as a chair of the Finance Committee, I can tell you, I've been doing budgets for a very long time, but in the the $100 million range. So doing a budget at the $400+ million range is a little daunting. But I have to say that the chief and Carrie Lynn and all the people at PRP are incredibly gifted and certainly focused on this budget and have done an outstanding job. Nish was kind enough to have me at the office for the last meeting. I think we accomplished more face-to-face. I know it's difficult times, but Chief, thank you for having me there with members of your team, your deputy chiefs, to go over a number of the items. But I can tell you this is a very, very strong team at PRP who've done an excellent job, and I'm very confident that when we present this in February, it will be the best budget that we could possibly put forward. So Carrie Lynn, to you and Chief Nish and all the team, thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Boughton. Mayor Brown.
Thank you. I'm switching through the 2 meetings that me and Bonnie are both participating in. This is a challenge of having to vote and speak at 2 meetings at the same time and turn the right mute on, the right mute off. But certainly we've had the pleasure to see this presentation before. I just want to say to Chief Nish, thank you for putting emphasis on areas that are a concern to the community. Looking at where there's a concerted effort, whether it is street racing, whether it is mental health, whether it's human trafficking. I think we're seeing that reflected in this budget. And so I think you've done an exceptional job. The one thing I just want to draw out a little bit more, just because it's so topical, is the mental health funding. And I'd be remiss not to officially ask this question, because there's been such, I guess, sensitivity around the right responses. Given the investments you're doing right now, where does this take us to? And I think it's important for the public to understand that we require a dance partner for this too. It's not just police funding. And so of the mental health calls we get to 911, what percent will we be able to respond with a mental health worker with the additional investments that you're making?
Thank you, Your Worship. So that's a very valid point. The reality is us not going to mental health calls at all is the the optimal solution and having the right people at the right time. And the reality is mental health is sort of infused with so many other public safety issues. We can't always discern what's what. So the reality is the MCERT team that we're proposing to get to 8, right now we only have 2 or 3 cars a day, and that's not 24/7 for a population of 1.4 million, means that our uniformed officers are still, for the dominant part, doing most of the work themselves. So what we've asked for is to increase to 8, which will get us to, peak times, a broader response. But to be clear, there is no funding stream for police to achieve that. We have to find those resources internally. And to your comment about the dance partner, is really this is seen as a health concern, and the funding stream for that goes through the Ministry of Health, through the LIN workflow to CMHA, so that they can get the dance partner, which is the crisis workers, to meet us halfway. And without them being resourced either, we don't have a solution. And so what we're thankful for is to get, I'm happy for David Smith, the CEO of CMHA, because he gets to meet us a little bit closer to the halfway point. It's still not enough, but we're optimistic about it. It still will not get us all the way there. So, we're looking at other opportunities, and one of the opportunities that the province is considerate of and going to help us with is fund CMHA to help us put crisis workers right in our 911's communication center. So before it even gets to an officer, do we have the ability to discern the jeopardy or the crisis that somebody's in on the phone and reorient them to the right services before it's a uniformed officer? So we're trying to get upstream. It's still not optimal. And again, we're still taking the cost ourselves on out of our our budget ask.
Okay, and Nish, just to be perfectly clear about this, so essentially what you're saying is that we're funding to the maximum that our dance partner right now will permit, our dance partner in the CMHA.
That's correct.
Okay, and so for people saying, why don't you spend more in mental health? This is an important point to understand. We are going to the maximum that we have a partner for, that we have a crisis worker for.
That's absolutely correct. And I'll go one step further, is that what the public's been telling us is other services should be mitigating this risk before it gets to us. So for us to exceed that is almost counterintuitive. And we got to meet our partners where their capacity is. And, we're going to the max of what they can do. We'd love to do more, but, you asked David Smith at CMHA, I don't want to speak for him, but he has got a lot of other services and programs that he needs to get funded too. And it's a difficult decision to split dollars on his end because it all is, heartbeats on the street that he needs. And Deputy Andrews, I don't know if you want to top up on that. I'll give the opportunity to you.
Thank you, Chief. Through the chair, the Chief's exactly right when he speaks to the issue of us being able to meet a CMHA halfway. The increase in funding that we're seeing to the MCERT program will allow us to put an additional MCERT car on the road for 12 hours per day. The funding of a embedded crisis worker in our communications will be a significant step in the right direction, but it still won't be optimal for a region of 1.4 million people, and will not have 24-hour coverage or even prime time coverage for a mental health crisis. We'll still be having to react with uniformed resources to mental health crisis calls.
Okay, and just so the public knows, given the tools we have right now, and you had mentioned this in a previous meeting, what % of the calls will we be able to respond to with a crisis worker this year compared to what have been in previous years? Now, I know it's not where we want it to be, but I just want to show that we're making progress.
Mark, do you have that data?
I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but Mayor, the fact is that we're still responding to the dominant number of mental health crisis calls with a uniform presence, and the 3 cars per day, which is where this funding will get us to, will increase the level of MCERT response, but will be significantly less than what is required. And I can get those numbers for you in terms of
Mark,
totals.
Mark, I think those numbers are important because, for those of us in elected office, people will complain. They'll say, why are the police, responding to these calls? And the reality is you're required to under the Police Act, and our police board and regional councils allocating at the recommendation of the police service, the maximum that we have a dance partner for. But for people that complain, I know last time, I think it was like 15% of the calls we had the resources to respond with a crisis worker. If we go up to 30% now, I want it to be very clear, we're doing the maximum that we can, that we have a dance partner for, and 3 cars is a step in the right direction. But for the public that wants to know, and we can encourage them to speak to their provincial representative if we're going to get more crisis workers to work in partnership with the police. Just out of curiosity, and to respond to all the calls, would we need 10 cars? Would we need 15 cars? What would that number be?
Yeah, and your worship, this is the complexity of the whole issue. So for context, 16 mental health apprehensions a day. We know we have probably 21 additional family disputes a day, 30 intimate partner calls a day, and I talked to Mr. Ventura. At our peak time in our communication center, we could get 200 calls an hour, and each call has a few seconds for a communicator to discern whether there's mental health involved or not. And a lot of times we have to send an officer out to the scene to make that first element of discernment. So, we deploy hundreds of officers a day, 12 hours shifts at a time. And we probably need to triple that if we were to meet the needs. And, anecdotally, I think just looking at the numbers, 3 MCERT cars a day don't do all 16 apprehensions. They do probably a third of them. So 2/3 are still being roughly done by uniform officers that, are doing their best because they're trained remarkably. I have to say in this whole budget discussion is I got to reflect on the fact that in Canada, we still have some of the best and highly trained individuals globally, from standards, capacity, and they do an amazing job. I recognize 2 officers that, save somebody's life in a mental health crisis, and, they get behind closed doors a quiet recognition, but that happens daily, but it's still not optimal.
And the reason that I'm being stubborn on this point is that, there will be some criticism from some corners saying, why is the police not spending enough on mental health? And I think just for our awareness, we should make it clear that we are doing as much as we have partners for currently. And it's not that our police officers wouldn't welcome that mental health response. The police officers that I've spoken to said they would love it. It's just not available. And so it's not like they're rushing into an incident, not letting the mental health worker respond. It's in many cases, you said about 2/3 of the cases, it's simply not available. And so if anything, aside from this budget, I think at some point our board should do a letter asking for, saying that we have those 3 cars, but if we had 9 cars, we would be providing our police and the community with the response that they expect. Thank you for highlighting what we're doing and the fact we're doing as much as we can. And I will certainly be advocating that we do a letter at some point to make sure we have additional collaboration to support your efforts, Nish, because I understand how much Chief, how much you understand that this is an important mechanism for policing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. I have a couple of other speakers on the list. but I just quickly want to bring this to everyone's attention that this board has been fully involved in this entire budget throughout, whether those are the committees and our offsite retreat. Each and every member brings different skill sets and lots of experience in different sectors. Again, I just want to assure this to everyone that this board has been fully, obviously under the leadership of Mr. Boutzen, as you are the next speaker in the line, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Chadha. From the Budget Finance Committee, the first question that I asked is that when we're getting mental health professionals to help PRP, does that mean a reduction in the budget? And that was my first question. And there isn't. The support that we're getting doesn't take away the costs for PRP. That we still have to supply a car. We need to have a PRP officer who's in that vehicle, who's going to that scene. The thing that the public doesn't seem to understand as well as that call in that they're taking, whether it be 911 or it comes in. We have somebody answering that phone who in a matter of seconds has to make a determination whether this is a criminal situation that's unfolding, whether it's mental health, what it is, and this is seconds in order to do that. I can tell you, working closely with Victim Services Appeal, which I did for many years, I know when those calls come in, how difficult it is for the person on the line to make that determination as to what can be done, how soon it can be done, do you keep them on the phone, all those other things. So this isn't something we just snap our fingers and we make the problems go away of sending the police to what should be a mental health call, or sending a mental health person to something that maybe has ratcheted up to a higher level and is really a criminal offense. So from a budgeting point of view, and Chief, thank you for the clarification that you've given me on that, but we are still going to have costs, all the costs associated with it. We will just, as a police force, do a better job with the units on the road, with the officers, in harmony with the mental health specialists. So we are heading in the right direction, and this is not a cost reduction because we're getting some support with the mental health professionals. So we'll just do a better job as a police force. It will not change what our budget is.
Thank you, Mr. Boutzen. We have Chief, you want to respond quickly, or should I go to Mr. Howell? Because
just very briefly, and Mr. Boughton's absolutely correct. We know other agencies have up to 50 or 60 MCERT cars, like up the staff. And so you can see in time, if it's achievable, you can do different models. But we want to be good stewards of what we do receive from our budget. For example, even the technology piece, the ability to enhance our communication, body-worn cameras, Deputy O'Doherty, we see that as a platform to increase our service in the mental health sphere. So Anthony, did you want to speak just very, very, very briefly on that, Anthony?
Thanks, Chief, and through the chair. Just to top up, part of our vision of body-worn camera wasn't just to capture an incident or an occurrence as it was happening with a member of the public or an interaction. Part of it was to proactively use the live stream feature on the body-worn camera to have a mental health professional, as one example, embedded in a real-time operations center, which we are investing in with analytics, and then provide that service to a span of officers. Instead of being in one vehicle, virtually, like us today, we can reach many through the technology. Now that's our goal. We've just implemented or starting to implement the program and working towards that. And we find that a future state of that should alleviate some of the pressures we see on the physical demands, in cruiser demands, and on the budget.
Thank you, Anthony. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Howell, you're next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Knowing the huge manpower absorbed by MHA calls, particularly men being held up at the hospitals, what would you think would be our greatest hurdle yet to be cleared to clear men from the hospitals? Is it still the medical community?
Yeah, I think so. My experience is that a police officer walking into an emergency room, really speaks a different language than a healthcare professional, right? And there's a risk in that space where the healthcare professional, doesn't know what happened at the curbside, just sees us walking in with an individual and having to take an officer's word for it. So part of this transfer of care protocol that Mark's team has been working on actually unifies the language. It allows us to understand, okay, the lower risk ones, okay, we're on the same page. The nurse practitioner or the physician and the officer can speak at using the same terms. At the high risk level, those are obvious, the ones that we need to be there to stay for the protection of people, we will stay. But the gap in the middle is where we're working on. So that is historically one of the biggest intersection points where, just the fact that we're police officers and we're not healthcare professionals is bridging that gap. And thankfully, provincial standards on transfer of care protocols have been established. We're trying to implement them and optimize them. There's some bugs to work out. But Mr. Howell, can I just double back? The fact that we are still the only legislated entity to take people to a hospital, speaks to some of the substantive issues. I think there are times where we have to be because of violence and threat. And sometimes we just, will always be those people. But I think there is space in that to unpack the other, tiers of individuals, like in the UK, that can respond initially and then determine, right?
Do you think some of the protocols that you enacted in Halton will work in Peel?
I think we're beginning to see the fruits of that work. For example, what Mark's done has brought like 2.5-hour wait times in Brampton down to roughly an hour. Like that's a big win.
That's amazing. Sure. Yeah,
that's a good win. And if we can get that at Trillium too, and in time work through the kinks, it's not easy. That'll help for sure. And I do think it's like, it's arrows in the quiver, right? Not one really hits the mark. You gotta work on all of them, right from our training, using mobile devices, enhancing the number and capacity of the crisis workers, all of them, the totality of them. Yeah, I think Mr. Howell will be in a good stead, especially to serve the unique needs of this community. We'll be in a good place. It'll take some time, but we're getting there.
Great, thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mr. Howell. If there's any other comment to make, we can make quickly. Otherwise, if not, we have some wonderful discussion from all sides and back and forth questions. And Chief, thanks to you and your entire team for the presentation. So if I can move, I need a mover and seconder, sorry, to approve the presentation for the 2021 draft budget. We have Mr. Howell, seconded. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Mr. Boughton. All in favor? So this is carried and this is approved. Okay, so the next item we have is we will now move up into the new business. Item number 4. Police reported crime statistics in
Mr.
Canada.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. I got kicked out. I'm back. I want to register my vote in favor of the budget, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Crombie. No problem. We'll make a note of it. Chief, would you or someone from your team like to speak on item number 4? Chief, you're mute, I guess. Yes.
Thank you. I double mute. I just want to just open it up to Deputy O'Duarty, who's actually we have Mr. Ventura here too as well. As you know, Stats Canada report crime statistics, and it is a complicated formula that takes into considerations a lot of factors so that we can equitably be compared across the country. And it can be confusing to understand what a weighted clearance is with a regular violence. So I might ask Anthony and Tony to kind of speak to that, but I do want to highlight something, and it's an important one which we would like to talk about. From a violent crime and a non-violent crime, And from an overall safety perspective, our region for 1.4 million, and not just because we have a little connection to Halton. Halton's a different community than Peel. And despite that, where we rank across this country, to give perspective, is something to be appreciative of. And there's some good work. Our officers, the clearance rates from our officers show an investigative commitment despite all the pressures to do the work, and kudos to them. But we intend on coming back to the board with a better narrative in 2021, because I just want to remind you, these are the stats from 2019. When we see the outcome of this year and next year and all the work we're doing, we'll be able to communicate that. But Anthony, can I open that up? Anthony and Tony, I don't know who would like to speak to that.
Sure, Chief, and through the chair, thank you so much. You will see the report that you have received really favorably depicts PRP as one of the safest regions in all of Canada. And the chief alluded to some of the impact factors that go along to measuring some of the different statistical reporting categories. And I just want to highlight briefly to you what some of those are. And then I'm going to turn it over to newly minted IT Director, Tony Ventura, just to provide a brief explanation on what those are. So first of all, a crime index is really just determining the number of crimes divided by your population. I just wanted to throw that out there because it's really not a great number to assess where you are comparatively, or even where you are in relation to year over year. It's a number divided by population. But the crime severity index brings into factor a weighted score of seriousness of crimes. So not one crime is equal to another, certainly in terms of statistics, and Tony will allude to that when he talks about statistical significance of some of these numbers. And so it impacts it. A theft will not have the same crime severity as a homicide, and that is what weighs into and impacts where we stand in terms of crime severity index. The last thing I just want to highlight to you before I turn it over to Mr. Ventura is what's called the total weighted clearance rate. Now, a clearance rate are one of those categories that have been long debated in policing. A committee called POLIS has worked on this for many years to really bring about some clarity into what the term clearance rate means. And we saw that police agencies over the last 5 or 6 years really got themselves into some hot water, especially in the category of sexual assaults. And so what POLIS did was really look to solidify what does a clearance mean and how can we weight that. So a clearance is really associated to solving a crime, having enough evidence to charge someone, or having identified someone responsible for that crime, having enough evidence to proceed, but for various factors that they've laid out, you don't proceed with that charge. So just let me give you a quick example of that would be perhaps a child under 12, or a suspect in a crime where you would have enough evidence to charge as deceased, has been deceased. So the reason I tell you that when you look at these numbers is because there are so many impact factors to determine where we sit. Given all those impact factors, we as a region stand out to be a safe region. And Tony, I'm just going to kick that over to you just so that you could explain a little bit more what the weighted numbers mean, just so that everyone has a better understanding.
Okay, thank you, Deputy, and thank you, Board, for letting me speak today. So very much, I'm going to carry on the conversation that the Deputy O'Doherty had started. Really, the weighted average represents the severity index of an individual crime. And if you look at the report, it is actually broken down between two different categories, sort of a non-violent crime and violent crime. So obviously violent crime are crimes that involve violence. And within that continuum, there's obviously going to be charges that are more severe than others. Of course, on one extreme, you'll have, a murder, attempt murder on the more severe side. And then on the less severe side, you'll have things like simple assaults, which might be somebody slapping somebody, kind of minor type offenses. The same thing goes in property crimes. So on the low end of a property crime scale, you may have something like a shop theft. Somebody steals a can of pop from a store or shoplifts a t-shirt. But on the more significant side of that, you'll have potentially break-and-enters or robberies, those types of things where they are much more severe. The one thing that's great about this index is it's a very good comparison of us across the country because it is conducted by Stats Canada. So every agency is using the exact same meter stick and reporting on the exact same crimes, and they're being counted in the same way. So that gives a very good uniform indicator. So I just want to highlight on the second page of the document, the overall crime severity index. So on that, overall in Canada, we're represented as the second best in terms of least severity, which has been spoken about in a region of our size is really quite an accomplishment. If we go forward and look in terms of violent crime and non-violent crime, again, on violent crime we're a bit higher than some of our partner agencies, but still quite good overall in the context of the overall in the country. So if you look from a violent crime perspective, we're actually half of what Edmonton is. So that's a fairly significant feat for us. Or potentially Edmonton isn't doing so well, but again, in comparison, that means that we bode well versus our compatriots. In the non-crime severity index, again, we're second best in the non-violent crime. So again, given our agency and the size of our region and demographics, it's quite good. On the fourth page, we'll talk very quickly about the weighted clearance rates. So again, we see that Peel Police is the third best in overall clearance of crimes that have been committed. Again, very good metric compared to our partners, especially considering Durham and Halton, other GTA police services in York as well. Subject to any other questions, I mean, most of the graphs are very self-explanatory. I just wanted to bring in the 2 points of that. It is a good comparator across all of the agencies across Canada, and it is very consistent. And the weighted portion of that being weighted based on the severity of the crime, so that not every crime offense is rated the same.
Thank you, Tony. And sorry, I should have just waited for you to talk and said what he said. So I'll turn this back over to the chief.
Sorry, Chief, you were mute. We could not really catch what you said.
I said you're doing a fantastic job, Chair Shadow. Actually, just returning it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So if any question or comment in regards to this, you're more than welcome, board members. If not, then may I have a mover to receive this information by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Regional Chair Yanika. All in favor? Carried. The next item is item number 5, PSB Financial Management, Police and Budget Policy Revisions. Chief, would you or someone from your team would like to speak on this item?
Yes, very quickly, Randy, I think might have sharing this with Carrie Lynn. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I learned my lesson from Deputy O'Doherty. I'm just going to turn it straight over to Carrie Lynn. Let the expert speak.
Thank you, sir. Through the chair, the financial management and budget policies were due for review. So we undertook a review of those policies. Some of the changes we've made are to bring it in line with some of the wording changes, just some language cleanup and whatnot. But one of the things that we noticed when we were undertaking a review is we previously just copied the Region of Peel's policies. But in doing so, a lot of the things that were requiring approval, it stated that it required council approval. So when we were looking at things and reviewing the Police Services Act, council approves our budget, but they don't have the authority to approve details in how we spend that money. So we've updated some of that wording to reflect that we have approval by the board on certain things, but those don't need to go to council for approval. So we've updated the policy to reflect that. We've added a couple other things, such as allowing temporary overages to our authorized complement at the end of the
Sorry, Carolyn, we're having difficulties in understanding. It was slightly better in the later part, but initially I was personally not able to understand much, but now it was really bad. So if maybe some volume or something need to be adjusted.
Randy, you might have to summarize, unfortunately, for Carrie Lynn, the audio is not coming through.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chief, and through you, Chair. I think what Carrie Lynn was just getting to were the points you find on page 2, and that's just aligning some of our policies to better suit the needs of the organization, and also expanding some of the limitations to better meet the needs, present needs. So the limits on authority for the deputy chief, et cetera, taking them from previous setting of $250,000 to $1 million in some cases. This is in line with some of what other police services have available to them as well. And, I'm not going to go through each one of the points. The report is there. But if there's any questions, I'm sure between myself and Carrie Lynn, we can answer them.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy. If there are any question, comment by the board members, you're more than welcome. If not, then looking for mover to approve the amendment. May I have the mover by Mayor Brown? Do we have seconder, Regional Chair Yanika? All in favor? This is carried. So the next item we have is item number 6, PSB procurement police revisions. Chief, would you or someone from your team would like to comment, speak on this item?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Chair. As again, this one has been approved by the Finance Audit Committee or reviewed by them. And Randy, I don't know if you would like to top up.
Yes, and through you, Chair. Again, once again, just we've reviewed the current board's procurement policy, and we've made changes that we're recommending to the procurement practices. It just provides us with increased efficiencies. And again, it aligns better with what other agencies are doing around the province. One of the things you'll see there, and one of the things I will speak to, on page 2, it speaks to the spending thresholds. On page 3, I think more importantly, it speaks to direct negotiations. We've had issues in the past where we have to go through a procurement process, an RFP process, and it doesn't always get us the best value for money. Often it's a low bid that comes in, and we find out later that the quality of the product or the quality of the services, in particular, maintenance contracts, et cetera, don't really meet our needs. I think more importantly, what this does, it allows us some more flexibility in those instances where, for example, we're looking at a platform. Often we talk about cruiser to courts. And when you're talking cruiser to courts, there's a number of technology pieces that we may be looking at. So, it's your radio communications. It's the mobile digital device within your car. It's the CAD system for the dispatch of police officers. And then your records management system. As you move through a RFP process, often what you end up with is numerous vendors. So now you're managing those vendors, you're managing those various maintenance contracts. And at the same time, what you have to be careful with is when one vendor does an upgrade, how does it impact the next vendor down the line? So, we're always looking at the ability to, it's obviously better if you can have an individual vendor do the entire platform for you. And there's obviously efficiencies gained in that, and you're dealing with, less vendors, less maintenance contracts. So an overall savings really whenever you move to that type of procurement process. There's also a section in there just to deal with urgent purchases. On occasion, we found where we need to finalize a contract. So it speaks to that as well on page 3. And besides that, unless there's any questions, that pretty much summarizes the report.
Thank you, Deputy. Board members, any question, comment? If not, looking for Vice Chair Watia, is that a comment or you're my mover for the motion? I believe the mover for
Question, Chair.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Just on that last explanation that Deputy Chief Patrick gave on the urgent responses, why does it say non-emergency situations while the description seems to suggest emergency situations? And is there a scenario where, is there another scenario where there are emergency situations that require procurement? I'm just further explanation on that.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just through you, Chair. I'm just looking at the paragraph now.
No problem, Randy, sir. You can take your time.
Okay, sorry. So it says, although not emergent, urgent purchases may arise between council meetings. So, I think it's just the difference in the wording there. Obviously, what we're looking for is the ability to move forward on urgent situations.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarity. Okay.
Sure, no problem. If no further discussion, I'm looking for a mover and seconder to receive this, to approve this amendment. May I have a mover? Moved by Mr. Watia. Do we have seconder? Seconded by Mr. Boughton. All in favor? Carried. The next item is item number 7, PSB 2021 proposed schedule of section 31 meetings. Is there any question or comment regarding to the proposed 2021 schedule? Seeing, hearing none. So may I have a mover to approve the 2021 board meeting schedule? It's by Mayor Brown, seconded by Regional Chair Anika. All in favor? Approved. So this concludes the public portion of the Peel Police Services Board meeting. I quickly want to thank each and everyone, especially all our Police Service Board staff members, to putting this meetings together throughout the year. And just to remind everyone, this is the last meeting of this year. So we will be conducting our meetings in the new year some point according to the calendar. So I want to thank for assisting all these new way of conducting the meetings for many, many months. Of course, now I guess we are all used to, and today both the mayors has another important meeting. So they played around with the different screens as well. We understand how important both of you are for our region, to both the mayors and of course all of the public who participate. Again, this is our last meeting of the year. I want to thank each and everyone for assisting and participating this police board meetings throughout the year. I want to wish on behalf of the board everyone happy holidays and Merry Christmas to those who celebrate. And again, looking forward for a better new year in 2021 when we see each other. We will adjourn for 5 minutes and then we will move we'll move in camera through the Zoom conferencing. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe.